Oh, good. Here we go. All right. Okay. It is 4:07 and I am going to call today's meeting of the Grand County Planning Commission to order. We will begin with citizens to be heard, and I see at least one person on who may want to make them. So Mark, if you want to come on, state your full, I assume it's Mark. State your full name. You're welcome to speak. Oh, wait, we can't hear you. Hold on. Do you want to? Mark, can you hear us? I can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Mark.
No, we can't hear you. Do you want to try calling in and see if that works? Nope.
Reading lips. He's reading lips bit. Yeah, he's not muted. So
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Wait, now we can hear you.
there we got it.
Oh my God.
Mark, now we can hear you.
That could have been worse. Okay. Thank you. I'm so glad I'm here. It's difficult for me to start. First off,
Oh, we can't hear you now. We lost you.
Mark, your sound cut out again.
It.
I wonder if he killed his video. It
If he
might
killed
help.
his video, sometimes that helps.
Yeah.
Oh, because service.
At least, yeah. With me out there.
Okay.
is the damn thing. God bless.
Okay, we can hear you. If you keep your video off, it might help.
Okay, I'm trying to find the phone number to call in. So
We
give
can
me
hear
just
you
1 minute. There's the phone number. Give me one
We can hear
second,
you now,
okay? I'm
Mark.
sorry.
Well, Mark, we can
Well,
hear
you-
you fine. Do you want to
Okay,
just
here
go
I-
ahead?
Here I come then.
All right.
Okay.
I'm looking at the agenda for today, and I thank Elise for putting the proposed Spanish Valley survey up so I can see where it's at. It's been quite some time. I see very little has changed since the last time I commented on this. Can you see and hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. You're good.
Yes.
Obviously, my questions are on the last two of the policy questions, and they regard bed and breakfast. And they are the wording of these just seems to hold such a bias, and it just seems just oh so wrong to me. Like for example, that you're basically intending for bed and breakfast to be reduced to 1 or 2 bedrooms. For me, the question really is, why are unsupervised rentals, overnight rentals, not even mentioned in this overnight survey? As I said last time, what I suggest is that your question might be more like, is there a bed and breakfast or an unsupervised overnight rental in your neighborhood? And how does that affect you? Or it might read, there are over 300 unsupervised overnight rentals in Grand County and 25 bed and breakfasts. Do you have one or the other in your neighborhood, and how does that affect you? I just wonder why there is a war on bed and breakfast when we are the most responsible overnight hosts in this county. I know there was a brouhaha on one bed and breakfast 2 or 3 years ago. I just want to know why the 300 unsupervised overnight rentals, which are the real problem, they are the ones that take housing away from our housing market, not bed and breakfast. Bed and breakfasts are already a home. Unsupervised overnight rentals have taken over entire neighborhoods, and there's nobody there to supervise them. And I just want to know why this hard on for bed and breakfast and unsupervised rentals aren't even mentioned. Can you explain that to me?
Mark, we're not going to do back and forth right now, but if you would
Okay,
like.
that's fine. I'm not going to do a back and forth with you, but I'm just curious why your proposed survey lays hard on bed and breakfast and doesn't even mention overnight rentals. I just wonder, and I'm going to follow through. I want to know. In the long run, I'm going to find out. So good luck to us all.
Thank you for your comments, Mark. And let's see here. Do we have anyone else who's on to make a public comment during citizens to be heard? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to ex parte communications and disclosures. We don't have any external action items on our agenda. But if anybody wants to share anything, Tony?
Yeah, I just wanted to inform the rest of the commission now that I have been appointed in a fully vetted voting capacity. I discussed it with my supervisor at my day job, and my professional capacity requires that I would recuse myself from any voting business that relates to land adjacent to the Colorado or the Green River. So that's coming in the other direction from my work to the commission. I just wanted you guys to be aware that when that adjacent land question comes up, I will not be voting.
Thank you for the heads up and welcome formally and officially. Only took us 8 weeks. Wonderful. Okay, so let's move on to approval of meeting minutes from November 8th. If there are any comments, go ahead and jump in. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion.
I think Jenna found a minor error in the title of the agenda or something, and she fixed it on our end, but it wasn't in the packet fixed. So I don't have them in front of me, but whatever that was. Jenna, do you?
Yeah, it was just in the date. So if anyone had made mention, I saw that already and corrected it.
Oh, the extra.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, is there a motion to be had?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the minutes with the one change suggested.
All right, is there a second?
A second.
Motion by OB, seconded by Steve. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from the November 8th meeting, raise your hand or say aye. That looks like 6 in favor. Unanimous. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Tricia, County Commission update.
Okay, can you hear me all right, Emily?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, so just a couple items from the November 16th meeting, things that I, think you might be interested in. We did approve a resolution for just a letter of support for AT&T and AT&T tower. It's out on 313. Originally, they said, because there are some oil wells out there, and they said, oh, there's already existing infrastructure. I'm like, great. But then that wasn't necessarily the case. So it should be noted that we really kind of not attacked them, but we really grilled them on a number of items. So it's on the knoll is what they call it. Out on 313, it would be 80 feet tall. They went on and on about, the idea of providing safety, right? So that people have the capacity to call for help if needed. And so again, it's just a letter of support for a grant. And so we did end up giving our support for that, but it was noted that we have all these additional, if we move to the next phase, that we've got a lot of questions. So that's kind of that. The second one was approval of an agreement with UDOT for hotspot funding for the Spanish Valley Drive paved pathway. This is a $2.7 million project. And right now the shared path, UDOT is funding the first portion of it that would go from Mill Creek approximately to Starbuck Lane, which is like Arroyo Crossing. And so that's exciting that we start kind of moving along on that. The next, we went around and around and tabled this item. I think this was the third meeting that it was tabled to. We almost tabled it again. But basically our letter of support for the Mill Creek Community Collaborative regarding Mill Creek Canyon. And so in the end, again, after quite a bit of hubbub, we changed some verbiage regarding bikes up on the rim. We just wanted the BLM to study that, and Potato Salad Hill, because the way that it was written originally, it was like, we want to get rid of those two things, right? And so we just said, we want you to further analyze the impacts of those two things, having, motorized vehicles on Potato Salad Hill and bikes up on the rim. So that's kind of where we're sitting with that. There was a motion, and this relates to you guys, as far as the approved and amended restated rules and regulations for high-density housing overlay developments. And it was basically surrounding foreclosures. And I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding was, anyways, that if a property is foreclosed upon, that lending entity then has to find the same qualified buyer, for the next.
Yeah, that's
Is that right? Am I saying that right?
Yep.
It's
That's
not
how I
my
understand
forte. Okay, thank you. I'm like, ah, okay. You guys, we did adopt the resolution approving the conditional use permit for the Oars warehouse. Did you want to add anything to that?
Really, it's just, it's pretty straightforward. They're just relocating from their existing, spot, which is just up the road on Highway 191, or south, I guess. But yeah, so it's not really a big impact. I think.
Right, yeah.
Where are they relocating to?
It's like, I don't know how many parcels down or up towards town more, but it's like not that far up 191. It's 2802.
Oh, there's something closer on 191.
22.
Oh,
Yeah,
funny.
on the same side of the highway.
Okay.
Yeah, they just bought a property there. And so they're getting out of their lease.
Cool.
And then the last thing, this actually, we're in the budgeting process for 2022, which is, thank the Lord, we have Chris Baird. That's all I'm going to state. It's a lot. He's got a lot of spreadsheets going on at all times. But here was an interesting thing that he found out about Airbnbs. I thought you guys would find this interesting. He said, somebody from the tax commission, I had him just restate in an email, so I'm just going to read it if that's okay. Somebody from the tax commission told us that Airbnb remits the TRT to the entity of the owner's mailing address, as opposed to the entity of the physical location of the rental.
What?
Yeah, about 56% of our short-term rental businesses licenses have out-of-county mailing
No.
addresses. So I assume we're losing a lot of tax revenue. He is on it. He is on it.
What was the percentage?
56%, about 56% of our short-term rental business licenses have out-of-county tax addresses.
Out of curiosity, 2 questions. Do we have a estimate dollar amount for what that's meant over the last
Yeah.
5 years? And do we think there's a means to recollect back
Yes,
taxes? then?
and yes, to go back, yes, he said he's on it, and yes, he's gonna look at going back. Yes,
That would be huge.
yeah,
If
huge.
never mind, these can be separate questions. It doesn't.
So
need to be.
that's kind of all.
That's
he told us,
infuriating.
And that he's on it. I know, isn't that crazy?
Not that surprising.
Pretty
If it's affecting us, it can't be the only community. I'd be very curious to see if other people have solved that already.
Yeah, I mean, I hear class action is, there'll be some real inertia to get behind that.
And once
Yeah.
again,
Chris.
it's so great we have Chris, right, like
Yeah.
on these things.
I wonder how many other communities
yeah.
don't know
Yeah, I know. So I thought you guys would find that of interest. I thought it was interesting.
To say the least.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Any questions for Tricia about county commission action items? All right. We have a long list of P and Z updates. I'm actually going to ask that we flip 7 and 6 and talk through the survey before we talk through the general plan, because I think one maps into the other. But otherwise, I think, Elisa, I imagine you'll be sort of driving us through this list. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so can I see that agenda packet there? Because I jotted down my list and then I don't know where it went. Okay, so I think John was going to actually take the first few of these, the San Juan County collaboration effort, and just talk about that to begin with.
Hey, San Juan County. We've had one of their commissioners actually works for us. Cole Cloward, who is our deputy building official. He's on the planning commission in San Juan County, in case you didn't know that. And they evidently are not interested in a joint meeting, almost unanimously. And so we're working with MAC and with, I think it's Scott, that's their planning director. I've not talked to Scott yet. So we're trying a couple of other angles to see if we can get them to the table. But at this stage, the only commission we'll be meeting with on the horizon is the city, unfortunately. That's kind of where we're at. I don't think there's any personal animosity that I know of. It's just that there's a history of difficulties between the counties on a number of topics. And I'm not completely clear in what they are, so I don't want to even speculate. So that's kind of left them in a position
Status quo.
Keep it going.
where they would like to leave it completely not even for now. The next couple, we've got a couple of strategies in mind. I think Emily, I'm not sure if any of the commission members know anyone down there, but building those relationships sometimes takes time. And that's one of the biggest challenges in regional planning is building relationships. So I don't know if the commission has any ideas. That could be
Well,
made pub-
I
that could be
sent an
public.
email to Trent and I haven't heard back. My next strategic plan is to offer up lunch and drive down and see if he'd be open to grabbing lunch on me. So I'll report back if that's successful. Who can say no to a sandwich? So, but I do think there may be some developers who could have relationships, friendships, or some of the community organizations, maybe like the church, for example, some of the churches in town might have relationships there. So I think it might be worth just asking around to our network and see if somebody does have a connection where they could introduce us in. Not with the agenda of trying to force a meeting if that's not something they're interested in right now, but even just open up lines of communication. So potentially an opportunity there.
Any relationship building we can do, on the positive side, of course. There could be negative relationships too. But
So John, the only reason they gave was that there's a history of incongruity between the two commissions, or?
Well, not
Yeah, I
specifically the
think
commissions. but
from
just
what I
the-
understand, there's a history of negative communication. So they feel like they've been the ones that have been told what they should do and how they should plan. And they don't, and I'm characterizing this, of course, trying to couch it, but I think the impression they've been left with is Grand County's imposing their will, trying to impose their will in some way. And I think that's clouding the idea of constructive engagement.
Well, I'm sure that there's a path forward. What it looks like is to be seen. But maybe we can, if anybody has a connection to San Juan County Planning Commission, commissioners, past commissioners, or can think of anybody in their network who might be able to make an introduction. I can think of a couple people offhand that I might reach out to. I think, the most important thing is understanding our neighbors and understanding what motivates them, what concerns them, what their vision is going to be very important since, the boundary is very liminal these days. So, okay. Anything
We have
else?
a lot of common things in common that we're working on. The transportation plan obviously doesn't stop at the boundary because the road doesn't stop at the boundary.
John, I
Plan might stop at the
wonder if this is one where going with some of our partners through the state might be.
Michael's on the call here. He might have some ideas. Maybe some of that could be offline.
Yeah, why don't we take that offline and talk through it? Because I know like the governor's office for rural development works across the groups. So there may be an opportunity of connection there. And I can think of a few community members, former commissioners who might be able to help to broker that. So, but let's offline that and talk through that this week and see if we can't find a way to move forward in some capacity.
Mhm. Yeah, good idea.
That's a great idea, Tony. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
Okay. Next on the agenda, I don't have it in front of me. So what's next on the agenda?
So the next item was the debrief on our November 10th public workshop.
Okay, yeah. I think Obi was there. I can call him Obi, Mr. Obi was there. He may have some comments. The agenda was basically 5:15 to 5:30. We talked about, well, from 4 o'clock to 5:15, we actually talked about the unified or the general plan with 9 tables. And so land use was a key one, which I don't think any other commission members, I'm sure Bob has some insights. We had a consultant there to kind of receive comment and meet, the chance to meet him. He thought it was pretty impressive. He's got a big job in front of him. Trails and transportation, Maddie was there, so was Bill Jackson. Public safety, Bill Hulse, building official, and Brandon, our deputy fire chief. Housing was there, so Jenna Wetzel and Ben Riley, sorry. And then we had an engagement table and strategic planning table too, which Elisa looked after. Health, we had the hospital there, and I forget her name, Trish, I think it was Trish.
Christy Calvin, yeah.
Casey, she's really good, really good,
great.
yeah.
Super smart.
Infrastructure, we had Dana from Groundwater and Sewer, and we had Arnie there, and they did a great job too. So I might be missing a couple of them, but I think we got some feedback. A lot of it was verbal and some written comments back. So we'll be debriefing that. Bob, you might have some comments too.
Not probably really. Emery Fiber was there. Interesting things you would learn were things like the hospital is planning a $30 million expansion. So it was kind of interesting. We're so early in the planning process for the general plan that it was, from my standpoint, most of it looked like, here's information on the hospital and what they're planning to do. Here's Emory, and I think they've got, what are they, a county provider at this point. There was a housing display on a Royal Crossing, HASU and those folks. But it was still interesting information, but we aren't, of course, yet to a concrete plan. And I would say, and John, correct me on this, when it started, I think I saw maybe 17, 18 people who weren't presenters, but at one point, I think there maybe were 34. And of course, there was a bit of movement, some people would leave after 40 or 45 minutes. And there was the introduction of the people who, and I know you're going to cover this later, the Unified Transportation Master Plan, which is advanced enough that people could actually probably make comments, and there were some maps out that they could draw on, but most of that took place during the latter part of this get together. But I'll let you cover what they were talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, so Emory actually has they're very aggressive, lots of fiber going in. The cell stuff is still challenging, of course, and that's still not their job, but they run fiber to towers if they can. So they've got that franchise now, and they're very aggressive on how they're pursuing that. In fact, they're moving and making leaps and bounds. So I'm not sure if anyone's had fiber yet, but if you're not, it's coming. It's always good to have fiber in your diet, they say.
Oh my God.
So the other one that I missed was the one you meant. Well, the transportation one was the full blown thing that started at 5:30 and went all the way through to 7, actually past 7 to 7:30, because I had to lock the doors. So it went for quite a while. Lots of chatter. I thought, Bob, you're right. We had, I think we counted about 35 to 40, I think, that were non-presenters. The goal was to actually have presenters interact amongst themselves too. It wasn't just the public. It was actually that networking opportunity for us to work together. This is kind of more of a launching kind of thing, and thinking about how comprehensive planning works, how pieces can work together, and a move by one person affects somebody else. So that was really, I think, an important takeaway to me, is to keep working on those kinds of things. Regional planning, for example, should be a real initiative. We should be able to do regional planning workshops with the counties and the city together. We did invite the city, obviously, to participate, and they didn't have a table, but they represented in a number of different fashions. So the transportation master plan discussion, the next meeting is going to be on December the 16th. I think, Emily, I think you're on the TAC. Aren't you on the technical advisory committee? So that's coming up, and that notice should have gone out to everyone that's on the TAC committee. So you should have got that, I think, last week. It's been set for Grand Center. The TAC meeting is going to be 3 hours long. It may sound a bit long, but actually it's going through the whole table and what their objectives are within their RFP. So it includes a whole list of projects where the data is. It's taking a look at what those projects look like in the whole realm of transportation. And there are a number of weak points in the project list that's there. So that TAC workshop is really an important step for the county and the city. The other one that's part of that is a public meeting will be held after that too, to do some presentations and discuss the projects and what the TAC committee results were. So that's ramping up, and that day has been set for the Grand Center, which we got that room again, which we thought worked out fairly well. The only difficulty is it's hard to do online. And I think that's one of the challenges. And the mic system there is a bit funky, so it needs some kind of work. They got a lot of feedback. They got over 60 comments, 60 that is, and we have all the boards. If anybody wants to do a little tour, we have about 20 different boards that are set up. With a lot of them have the data points, the weak points where they are, and well, the failures. If you know the level of service and transportation, it goes, I don't know if I explained this before or not, it goes from an A to an F. So an A is an open highway, B is kind of a couple of cars on the road, C is where you want to design, because if you're in a B or an A, you're over designing your highways, which is expensive. So C is usually where you want to be, even though in school, you don't want to get a C. Your parents usually don't like that, right? But a C in transportation is a good score. Anything below that, like a D or an E or an F, is considered a failure. So, usually in a big city, a 2 lightweight, 3 lightweight is considered a D. We have a couple of failure points in the city. You would probably guess some of these. One of them is the left turn lanes onto 191. Any of those left turn movements are usually considered a failure if you're waiting too long, but they only occur certain times of the year. So you have to balance that out too for the kinds of expenses that are there. One of the comments that was made, I'm not sure if Bob was still there was near the end, around pedestrian travel across 191, slowing traffic down and trying to manage the left turn lanes and doing a better stacking job of the left turn lanes. I think Devin with UDOT did a pretty good job of explaining the background, the data, how they brought it forward. At least I was kind of half listening to that. Bob, I'm not sure if you want to follow up on that, but that was one of the comments they got back. So they're debriefing the 60 comments too, and those will come back out, obviously not in a confidential way, for us to look at. And that would be obviously, hopefully we bring that back to the Planning Commission too. So that's all I had, unless Elisa or Bob have anything to add, or Jenna. Is Jenna there? Let's see, Jenna. Yeah, she's on. Jenna's on too. If Jenna has
I'm
anything.
here, thanks.
Several people from the county commission were there.
That's right. Yeah, we had a.
And I think Luke, the newly elected person from the city, was there. Chris was there, Baird, et cetera. So that was nice to see.
Yeah.
McKenna,
Okay, so if there's any other further comments, Trish, you were there. Were you there, Trish? Yeah, you were there. So
I have a quick
don't know if Trish-
question. There's a little bit of a tangent. Is UDOT still against installing left turn lights? This is like definitely a tangent, but they are. Okay, cool.
oh, no, I don't
Oh.
know. I'm sorry. I was acknowledging your question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that discussion was part of what they were going through, and that'll be part of the analysis. But
Cool,
I think
great.
they've done a fairly heavy duty review of left turn, of both of the size of the left turn lanes and the advanced left signals.
Cool.
McKenna, I can't even, why would you even try to turn left in this town? I mean, just don't.
I
know,
don't,
I know.
but I just know for a while they were like, no, we're not installing those. We're not doing it. So I'm just curious.
It's horrible.
3 right turns.
He's got to make big loops.
Yep.
I have a question that we can maybe pin when we talk about the general plan, especially in the southern reaches of the county. We've seen development patterns start to change, and I would really like to know how we are considering changes in traffic flow versus like what is currently documented against how we think about planning nodes, density, and so on. So one example that is more emergency based is the lack of road flow on Stocks Drive, which has changed traffic patterns in my neighborhood along Beaman Road. But we also then have increased traffic density along Spanish Valley Drive. And as we look to investments in, curbside improvements, sidewalks, and so on, I just would really like to get a better sense of how, and I know I'm not alone in this, of how these two are informing each other. Because, we're working on both these at the same time. It's so wonderful. And I think there's just things to learn from that. So we can pin that until the general plan update, but I don't want to lose it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can address part of that now if you want, Emily. I think, not that we're going to nail it, of course, but land use is, and transportation are connected at the hip, and one affects the other. You don't do one well without doing the other well. So Spanish Valley Drive, as far as UDOT is concerned, is considered the secondary access. In some ways, you do need a secondary access in case something gets blocked. But also, it's considered more of an arterial and a backup to 191. You need to think about those strategies as you move forward, because the bypass obviously is not getting much play and doesn't sound like it'll get any play with UDOT in the long term. And if you don't start planning for those kinds of things, they never happen. So that puts a lot more pressure on the internal road network. And I'm not getting at your specific question, but as a member of the TAC committee, that'll be an important element to bring up, both localized traffic and the impacts, the kind of the ripple effect that you get when you start increasing or putting in certain types of traffic control devices. The other one is, I'm not sure if this affects that area or not, is roundabouts and traffic calming. I think the speeds on 191, especially as you get into the county, are much too high. But those kinds of things really need to take a look at. The accident rate is one of those things that they measure too. Obviously, that's a big data point. And they have a lot of, I don't know if anyone was at the Friday session that UDOT had at brainstorming, long, far-reaching, what did she call it? Something that was basically horizon. So it's general plan oriented. So they're looking at some strategies as far as transportation in this area is concerned. They're going around the state too. So that was on Friday with an exercise. It's probably identifying a whole bunch of different strategies and impacts that can happen in transportation. So I'm not getting at your question exactly, but I think it's one of those things in the TAC workshop that will be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I know there's been enough changeover on this body that I think maybe OB and I are the only two that have had this particular issue come up. But we had a series of applications along Spanish Valley Drive and roads that funneled into it in that southern reach. And this question of improvements to the Spanish Valley Drive facing part of the parcel, such as adding sidewalks and gutters, what that means, but also changing in traffic flows. And I know we had a long discussion about that at some point about would have been a year and a half ago or so, that just never sort of went anywhere. Of just, are our assumptions currently built into our traffic plan and our land use code realistic to the actual patterns on the ground? Because anecdotally, I can tell you they're not, but anecdotally, it's not the same as data. So it's just one I think we'll want to stay close to, since I know that it has come up in the past with individual applications, and I imagine will come up again in the future. But that was open-ended enough that I think we can move on. Any other comments or questions around, I guess, item 3 and item 4?
Okay, if not, we will move on. I was going to actually suggest, apologize for not thinking of this before I put the agenda together, but to combine my housing plan update with the Arroyo Crossing update. So if I could just go ahead and move that up to now, the housing plan update. Okay, so Jenna and I attended the housing task force meeting a while back now. It's been, I don't think we reported on it even at the last planning commission meeting, but Caitlin Myers at the city is working, she's spearheading the update for the affordable housing plan that was created in 2017. It's this little plan booklet right here. It's on our website, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Anyway, so that was in 2017, and this is, this is a countywide, not just city, obviously. This is the countywide affordable housing plan. And she's spearheading the update of this document, but it's going to be kind of a joint effort with the Housing Task Force. So planning and zoning has taken on a little section. We've kind of all taken on between HASU and the Moab Area Land Trust folks. And then I think a few other people on that committee are going to be working on this. So hopefully, I think sometime in 2022, we plan late 2022 to be able to have something finalized. But obviously, it'll be a process coming back to the Planning Commission with drafts and getting input from you all. So, but it's exciting, I think, because it's a good plan. There's a lot of information in here. So,
And then just to kind of throw this, and you guys probably already know this, but Caitlin is no longer with the city.
right, she's going.
She's
Did
going
she
to the-
already move to
No.
Moab Land Trust?
Yeah, but she's
Yeah.
going to the
January.
land.
She's
trust,
going to
so-
be the executive director of which
She's
is
She's moving in
already
January.
Okay, in January.
in January for the Moab Area Community Land Trust, which is a mouthful. So that's good. And then I just got a little update on Arroyo Crossing, which is that, let's see. So HASU, they broke ground on 6 of the 9 homes that they reserved and hope to close on, hope to close and break ground on the last 3 in the coming weeks. So there's 6 of 9 are already going up. And then let's see, they've already started discussions as well on submitting for financing for the 32-unit multifamily tract this coming spring. So that's also in the works. And then Community Rebuilds, they had secured 7 homes, which have been closed on by homeowners, and they've broken ground, but I'm not sure on how many of the units they're actually constructing at the moment, but they have broken ground on at least 1. I'm not sure how many. So that's exciting. Did you have an idea?
It seems like there's 4 or 5 of them.
4 or 5 going, yeah. Let's see. That's all I have for housing. Does anybody have any questions or feedback on that? Okay. The next 2 items, the general plan update and the Spanish Valley survey, I feel like maybe those should come towards the end. Actually, they're
well,
longer
I
sessions.
want to actually move us forward on deciding any changes on the survey and then enabling staff to get that out. So I actually do want to just pause on that one, and then we come back to the general plan following.
Sure.
Great. Okay. So here's what I recommend to go about this. First of all, just thank you so much, OB, for driving this for, at this point, over a year. It's really wonderful to see this move forward. Again, the reason that this started was we had done a survey when we looked at the small area plan from the 191-313 node. It was very successful. We got very useful community information that extended beyond just that particular node and planning project. And so that was the impetus for raising this. I want to just, we can discuss this and debate this. I do just want to suggest a couple of changes that are worth conversation just to kick us off. If anyone else has any suggestions, we'll call them out. I'd rather do that than like go through line by line. And what we'll do is we'll just straw poll any changes of what exists, make sure that we're all aligned, and then I'll entertain a motion to direct staff to form this into a version that can be put on the website and citizen portal is sort of the internal motion that we'll be driving to. Okay, so first of all, just to call it out, and OB mentioned this, in this form, we do still have some red lines for questions about feasibility of various maps. And we did find that visual cues were very helpful for people. Staff, I know you have your hands full. Do you see any red lines in here that are just like, we just don't think we'll be able to get to that in a reasonable period of time? Otherwise, we'll just assume that you can unlock that at your pace and we won't spend time there. There's one on page 6 of our packet. There's one at the bottom of page 8 and at the top of page 9.
No, I looked at all of those and I immediately thought those would be very feasible and doable for us in relatively soon. So
Wonderful.
no problem. I definitely can make the map with the landmarks for number 7. I was already starting to think about how to do that. The updates on number 2 for the high density housing. That, I don't know why my numbering is wrong. Oh, this is the policy questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the HDHO, I can definitely address that one. That's easy. And just to clarify on the very first red text, that embed the Google map with a dark line for the boundary. That's just, you're just talking about the boundary for the county versus the city, correct?
I actually think that came out of a question about the boundaries of Spanish Valley. And Bob, do I remember that correctly?
I think you do, and I think that somebody suggested, well, clearly below where the city is, and then down to the start of San Juan County. And I would guess that that was where the 2 lines somebody suggested might be drawn on the map.
Okay.
So maybe what we could do is show the city boundaries instead to just clarify where that is. And then the area where the university is at that Mill Creek interchange, it does sound like there is progress to move forward on annexation. It's just expected. It's just a question of when. So I don't know if we want to mention that as well. Tony, is that what you were going to say, or did you want to contribute something else? There's a mind meld right there. Look at us go.
I'm fine.
Okay. So I'm not going to bother straw polling this one. Is anyone against showing the city boundary and the annexation's potential zone of annexation? That sounds very much like zone of demarcation. So maybe we can find a better terminology, but you know. Any other suggestions for things that should be added to that map?
And then San Juan County.
Yeah,
Whether
San Juan
county or-
County's boundary should be on there, right? Okay, that's easy. And then also I had already put into some thought into the map for the kind of showing the commercial nodes in areas that have already been talked about. And I found those at one point, and I can't remember what they are off the top of my head. I'm sure you guys know some of those nodes. But I've seen somewhere where they were actually called out, and I don't know if it was the general plan from 2012 or if it was something else that I came across, but I will.
We've had
Before
some
I
suggested nodes. I don't know a place where I've seen them listed out. I mean, the obvious ones are Spanish Trail, Mill Creek. To be honest, those are the 2 that I'm aware of
Okay,
that have
well,
been.
I will come up with the list and check in with you all about what I'm thinking those nodes are so that before I create the map, I don't want to make more work, but yeah, very doable.
Does anyone have an issue with just asking staff to just use best judgment there based off of current conversation related to the general planning and versus bringing it back and doing a double check?
I'm totally good with that.
All right.
Emily, there's a little note here on the PUD, include GIS PUD map if possible.
Yeah, I want to adjust the policy questions separately because I'm sure there's just some conversation. I've got some concerns. So I'm sort of thinking everything above the policy questions right now, let's check first, and then we'll talk about the policy questions. This is actually on that note, this is more of a just like tactical function question. I'm concerned about, one, people getting overwhelmed by the policy questions and not completing the survey, or so just like length and confusion, but also just sort of the conflation of the 2. And I wonder if there is a way to ask people if they would like to answer questions about policy, but allow them to submit without requiring it so that we don't lose. So it's very much an opt-in and it's not a burden. Just from my experience of conducting online research, I could see that being a detriment.
I
Does
remember us
anyone have
talking about that in a previous meeting, and I think we had all said like that we should have It's the optional section where if you're interested in answering policy questions, go here, otherwise submit. I remember us talking about that.
Does anyone have an
Sounds-
issue with that approach?
It sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so let's make sure we do that. So before we move on to talking about the policy questions, are there any other questions, concerns, additions, changes, of questions 1 through 16?
I would
I have a
say,
question.
Okay, Steve, and then was that Makeda?
Yep.
Okay,
I would say on question 14, I think we may want to include a circle all that apply to the end of the question. Seems like people might have more than one response on that.
okay, that's a great idea. I won't straw poll anything that's not controversial. So any concerns about that approach? Okay, Makeda? Or Steve, was that it for your comments? All right, Makeda and then Tony.
Mine are for 4 and 5. Just upon, well, 4, 5, and actually the other one is a policy question, but 4 and 5, I think Mark had a good point that we should specifically, I think it's interesting that it does it's kind of a roundabout way of mentioning overnight rentals in the condos / residential that can be overnight rentals. I think we need to more explicitly say, like, that's one category, but then I think ONRs are another category. And it's like such a hot button issue in our community that I think it's really important to include that. And I think number 4 doesn't include, I couldn't find B&Bs on that list, but it is on number 5. And I think the same goes for number 5. B&Bs are there at the very bottom. I think they need to get moved up to be with the other.
And condo residential.
Yeah. And I think also an explicit ONR option would also be appropriate there.
Okay, so I hear a few things. So one is making sure B&Bs are represented in question 4 and 5 as their own line item. 2 is making sure they are grouped to be in the same location as other overnight rentals. So in this case, on question 4, it would be by item N. And then I'm not quite sure I understand the last one when separating it out. So we have condos. Would you like to separate condos from?
Well, I think
residential?
the condo residential developments that allow overnight rentals, like, almost feels like we're just kind of ignoring overnight rentals. It's like, oh, they could maybe be this. I think that could be its own thing. And then straight up overnight rentals should be its own thing as well.
Yeah, maybe the word allow does kind of seems confusing. It's almost like you should just call out overnight rental units,
Yeah.
maybe in parentheses, condos, single family dwellings.
Yeah, because somebody who might not have an issue with a residential condo, but they might have an issue with an overnight rental.
Well, and
condo.
then
So it's like,
to add to that too, he was distinguishing between unsupervised overnight rentals, which would be the folks that own
yeah,
the short-term rentals that don't live here. And then like the bed and breakfast where you actually live in the home.
Yep.
So there should be some distinction. I think.
yeah, I think that'd be appropriate for how
Makes sense.
hot button issue they are.
Is it simple enough to say overnight accommodations that require the owner to live on site and overnight accommodations that do not require the owner to live on site, and just sort of leave it at that rather than getting into all the different cross-sectional uses?
Some of them are
Yeah.
managed by management companies, but they're still not there.
Right.
Right, to be
Still
on
not,
the
right.
premises.
On it.
Yeah.
But that would still be the same, it would
I
fit under
think-
the same category.
I think that's fine. I just think we need to distinguish, because I think if somebody read this and they're trying to give feedback and say overnight rentals are really a problem in my neighborhood, or I don't want to see this, but they're not gonna be able to do that, and vice versa. So
I think we have a specific question like that. And that might be under the policy. I think that's the last question under
Yeah,
policy.
there's no-
So let me
That's
ask,
only
I am
about
gonna
that's not
I
about
am
overnight
just
rentals either.
straw poll this. So one, does somebody want to suggest wording to revise the list of question 4 and 5 to account for all these different types? And then let's just straw poll on that. So Makeda, I don't know if you want to try and take a stab at framing that, or if you want someone else to take a stab at just expressing that.
I don't know. I think licensed B&Bs is great as it for its own thing, for its, like, as it is listed in number 5, just moving it up. But I don't have a strong feeling about the wording as long as it's explicitly describing, I guess now I'm saying I am specific. I don't, what Elisa suggested about saying overnight rentals or overnight accommodations, parentheses, condos, blah, 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 whatever is fine with me. If other people have suggestions, I don't, yeah.
So we have licensed B and Bs where the owner is required to be on site is the one that's in question M and not in N. And we have licensed overnight accommodations, which just the opposite is where the owner is not required to be on site. Can we have a straw poll of just comfort with that language or a suggestion of change? So any amendments to that approach?
Can I throw a slight tweak, but pretty much the exact same thing?
Yes, go ahead.
So I would propose licensed overnight rental, residential spaces where owners live on site, and then same thing, but just put in caps where owners do not, in caps, live on site.
So you wouldn't even call it B&Bs. You'd say licensed overnight accommodations where they have to live on site, licensed overnight accommodations where they do not have to live on site. Did I state that correctly?
I might have muddled that. I would be okay with either whether B&B is explicitly stated or not, or more general overnight rental.
I hear you, Steve. I do know that the B&B community will be upset about that, but I don't necessarily have a feeling about it.
What do you think they'll be upset about? Not including it or including it?
I just remember previous emails they had, or previous meetings they had mentioned explicitly saying B&Bs because people know what those are and have are more comfortable with it when you use a more vague term that people might be, I don't know.
I would agree. I think they're different. I mean, B&B has bed and breakfast. A person living on site doesn't have to do anything but live on site. So they are different.
So for the sake of clarity, let me restate this back. And then if there's no amendments, we'll take a quick straw poll. So adding to both of these questions, in this case, reformatting M and making sure that these are in the same place. Option 1 is licensed bed and breakfasts where the owners are required to live on site, and licensed overnight accommodations where the owner is not required in full caps to live on site. Any changes to that? Straw poll in favor of that change? Great. So that just to kind of for clarity and to make sure there's no controversy that we're leaving on the table. And then Makeda, I know you said you had something on policy questions, so tuck that away. I do want to just get through these and then we'll come back to that. Tony, you had a comment.
Mine's pretty short, in reference to question 5, in areas outside of the highway corridor. I felt like it would be appropriate to either add another use or include with line F, public park, like preserved natural spaces or nature preserves. These would be as opposed to public parks, which are managed for human and recreational values. Lands set aside for the preservation of natural values. I did not see that contemplated. I didn't really know where else it would fit. And I don't think that's a logical thing to include in 4 along the highway corridor, but I think we could add that to 5 if anybody sees a reason not to. That's fine.
Could you just restate what you would imagine it said beside the little bubble?
Oh, you're muted, Tony.
Last year.
Preserved natural spaces, I think gets the point across, or green space.
Green space or preserved natural spaces.
Yeah, whatever's the in vogue jargon.
Okay. Any concerns with adding that to question 5? Alongside item F, public parks, so below or above that. Great, perfect. So let's do that. Does anyone else have any suggestions, changes, clarifications? I wonder if we should not use a mechanism.
I have one.
I leave, as far as how we go about it, I'll leave that up to staff on the best route forward. I mean, SurveyMonkey is free and easy, which is why I've used it in the past, but I think that we are going to be surprised by the amount of cross-tabular valuable data nested in this. So, OB.
Oh, no, I don't know what we used the first time, but whether it was SurveyMonkey or not, it was, yeah, and it was very useful information. I think it guided the 313-91 project.
And it still does, yeah. We refer back to that data a lot.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
I want to say that our new community engagement, public engagement website we'd be able to host a survey on that. I thought that was kind of the plan, but I don't know much about the capabilities as much as Laura does, but she's not here right now to ask, but I'm
But
sure.
we can do that. It'll be a good mechanism to keep it. It's just that the beauty of SurveyMonkey or something like that is you can translate the data straight into SPSS or survey, as you probably know, survey analysis without retyping, re-inputting it. The other thing I was going to say, if I could, Emily, is it doesn't look like in the survey that maybe I'm missing this. There's no socio-demographic information other than where do you live and what your age is, I think. Is that what the two things are? I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't anchor it a bit more with more socio-demographic questions.
So I'll share my experience of just market research. I'm in favor of this under a few conditions that I would recommend. So condition one is that we include it at the end of the survey and we also make it optional. So I'm imagining you'd have your questions and then would you be willing to answer a few more questions on policy is one option, and you open to sharing a bit more information about yourself to help us understand trends across Grand County. I think, I have found that it tends to lead to higher rates of completion. The other thing is I just want to be sensitive if we do ask for gender that we account for, I'm literally in the process of building a market survey right now, so I can suggest some very clear recommendations of how we approach gender, but I do want to make sure it's inclusive. So.
And the last question is, should we offer a prize? Or prize, one prize of some kind? It's very common nowadays. Doesn't have to be a bunch of
raffle?
prizes.
A dinner with John Gunther.
Dinner with Steve
Oh my
and Emily. Yeah,
Steve
wouldn't
Evers
be
will come and rake the leaves in your front yard. It's
Yeah,
great.
there you go.
I think that's great. So last time we actually sent little cards to every single residence in Grand County. I don't know what the cost was for that, but it might be worth looking into that because we did see once those cards go up, a pretty significant increase in responses. And I would just say anecdotally responses that did not align to what you would expect from the people who tend to be most engaged on either direction. So, but prize wise, again, anyone have an issue with that? Otherwise, I think we just direct staff to use their best judgment and budget and
There's something else.
Yeah, like it.
great. Okay.
And
So go ahead, Obi.
I was just going to mention, it is true we don't have a lot of demographic stuff, but I do think question 2 really gets at a lot of important demographic stuff. So it may not be so important my age, which I don't want to give away, but that I'm retired is probably a very important piece. So that's an actually kind of nice question that I think we'd have some good crosstabs on. I'm not against getting more demographic information.
Obi.
But I'm not sure, I'm actually not sure on this kind of survey what a person's gender might mean to what we'd want to do or their age. Just thought.
I think age is useful. I don't know about gender. I don't think gender is necessary personally, but age I think is relevant. Education is one that's relevant. But on question 2, I realize we have retired, we have working part-time or seasonally. We don't have, I am currently unemployed and seeking work, or I am a full-time homemaker. And those are important
Do we
designations.
think that the demographic of tribal member or indigenous person or Black or mixed or white or any of those things are relevant to this survey?
I would just counsel that it's probably something I would look to the expertise of staff on this one as far as sensitivities and necessity. I think Tony's right on gross household income. Helping us, everything we ask should have an intent behind it. So I'm not saying I disagree with you, Makeda. I just, there are potential sensitivities that could be, have reverse
Right,
incentives.
obviously, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously. I just-
But I do think also, so I mentioned into unemployed homemaker student is another one, full-time student. I am very interested to know for people making, in a higher income bracket, if they have significantly different opinions about things such as B&B's development density and so on than people who aren't in those brackets. I think that can help us better inform and ensure that our policies represent the full spectrum of people in Grand County and not just people with the means of having the disposable time to participate in the public process. So I'm done opining. Those are my opinions. Anyone
I
else?
have a B&B in Spanish Valley.
Anything from staff that we're missing?
What'd you say?
I have
I
a
don't-
B&B in Spanish Valley.
I
Sorry,
don't
go
know-
ahead, Rick.
Oh, yeah, did you want to say anything, Rick?
No,
Okay.
mine was on the formatting thing, and we're
Okay,
good.
okay.
So
I don't know if this is something that y'all have, if this would be relevant, but it was a suggestion, and I'll kind of talk about it later in the Economic Development Advisory Board update. One of the interesting program of funding ideas that they had was to support the possibility of like a maker studio space.
Mhm.
And we don't have that listed anywhere in our code for a category of land use that we could approve. So I don't know if that would be something to add to the list of types of uses, but just an idea. Just throwing it out there. Like,
Anyone against that?
craftsman, studio space, artists, like not industrial at all, but sort of more like
like artisans,
seamstresses and those kinds of spaces to provide that like as a multi-use building, flex space.
Yeah, those are super, they're gaining a lot of traction right now.
Okay, any concerns with adding that? Great. Anything else before we move to the policy questions? Okay, so to play back, staff is going to own ensuring that our maps are relevant to the questions in the packet. There are some additions to question 2, student, homemaker, and unemployed that we want to make sure that we add. We've added and clearly distinguished between B&B rentals when the owner is on site versus overnight rentals when the owner is not required to be on site, and ensuring that they are in 4 and 5. We're adding maker space to, it sounds like both 4 and 5, and the addition of open space, green space to question 5, as well as asking staff to use their discretion to add optional demographic questions to the end of the survey based off of best practices to ensure that we can use this data to make and inform policy decisions. Is there anything I'm missing or anything that we need to add? Okay. So as far as these policy questions, some of them have arisen out of past controversy, and I just don't know how relevant they are to ask now. They may be very relevant. I'm promoting my skepticism, but not my disagreement with including them. But for example, question 1 under policy questions just is like, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. And I just don't know how necessary it is to get out of this particular exercise versus as part of a broader general plan type community input approach. But I guess what I'd like to do here is just like, 1, any questions that are missing, first of all, if there's anything we believe to be added to contribute them. 2, any strong opinions about keeping the questions, and then we're just going to straw poll through each of them and make sure that we're good with them and, put it out there. So are we good with that approach? I don't think this needs to be controversial. I just want to make sure that we think it's the best practices to get what we are actually trying to get out of this survey. So are there anything that's missing, I guess, first of all? from these policy questions?
I'm curious if you can remind me, and my memory is not serving me super well right now, but if there's a reason why we are, like, number 3 exists for bed and breakfast, but we don't have a matching question for overnight rentals.
If I remember correctly, there was a meeting 9-10 months ago where several owners of bed and breakfasts spoke at a meeting during Citizens to be Heard while we were in the process of creating the first draft of this survey. And the question was added in respect to gauging citizen interest of going forward, since we were much closer to the tail end of our moratorium and redefinition of overnight rentals in the land use code. I'll put it on the table to say, I honestly don't think this question is valuable here. We ask about B&Bs elsewhere. I think having them in the use questions under 4 and 5 is useful. I would much rather approach this with dedicated focus versus just get, but it might be useful to get the just kind of, randomized reaction. So that's just one person's data point.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think it's a valuable thing to like put out into the community, but it's not necessarily super appropriate for this survey.
I think I'm of the same opinion. We actually had a lot of discussion about this as we were doing the surveys, why these ended up in the policy section. In some senses, we said to ourselves, wouldn't it be nice to know about these things?
Yeah,
But
I remember that
think-
discussion.
I think it doesn't really fit with the Spanish Valley survey. It might be a survey we want to do at some point.
Cool.
I wouldn't be hurt by having these not in the Spanish Valley survey.
Let me offer a suggestion to the table and get input back. I would recommend that we scratch questions 1, 2, and 3 from the policy section, 1 being very convoluted, 2 sort of being irrelevant at this point until the county directs further action, and 3 being, as we just discussed, not, better served through dedicated action. And we move question 4 up into the prime survey underneath those use questions of 4 and 5. Is there anyone who feels very different about that approach or would want to offer an alternate way to approach these questions or feel strongly about keeping them in?
I almost feel like we're just scrap it as well. Then
I guess I just want to kind of revisit the original intent behind having some of these and see and really, assess if they are still relevant or not. Because as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is just my recollection, we wanted to throw these policy questions out there because it was a chance to engage the public and get some feedback, kind of like hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. This was before the entire new planning department came on board, and we didn't have kind of this full public engagement process coming down the pipe with the general plan update. So we have a lot of public engagement coming. So maybe, if we wanted to touch up on these, there may still be opportunity. But as I recall, that was kind of the lineage, the origin of these. And so the situation has changed a little bit. So I think I am kind of okay getting rid of these. What are other
don't think you're
perspectives?
wrong.
I play that back in am I
No.
warm?
I think your assessment is correct. There were a number of controversial decisions, conversations, and applications that came before the Planning Commission and the county all at once. And since we were in the process of doing this, we're like, well, why don't we just ask about it? And I don't think there's a reason, like it's not a bad thing to do it. I just, right now, it's already a self-selected group out of Spanish Valley. I just wonder with especially the PUD question being first, it's very dense. It could block responses. And I want to get the rest of this in the wild as fast as possible. And I think we can take a more thoughtful approach to these policy questions. I don't want them to hold up the expediency of getting the rest in the market. That's more where my opinion is coming from on this. But Tricia, I know that there were some of these that you felt very strongly about. I'd really love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, but again, as long as you're not just gonna, not get that feedback, forget about them, especially the PUD one, because there were 2 very controversial PUDs that it was difficult. And myself being the only representative from Spanish Valley, you know, I'm on the commission alone, kind of trying to say, well, this isn't what those communities wanted, right? But did we truly know that? I mean, at least from the feedback I was getting, it's not what those communities wanted.
Can I?
And it is true that PUD was in Spanish Valley. As I recall,
Yes.
the one that was controversial, yeah.
Well, there was two of them. I mean, it was
Okay,
both,
yeah.
the one on Easy Street or Chapman, and then the one on,
Bench, East Bench.
thank you, yes, East Bench. My brain totally stopped. Right there. It's like looking at you like, help me.
Maketa, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna say, I would just hearing everybody kind of reiterate everyone else's sentiments on this. I think these are really important questions to ask. I just don't think they're super appropriate at this point with all the changings. I would propose that we strike all of the policy questions and make sure we hold on to them to be brought up during the general plan. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say, as you guys are talking about this, I do feel like there would be another way to present these policy questions more in a visual kind of presentation, especially when it comes to density, because that's what really the PUD and the HGHO is really just coming down to a question of what you feel about density in your neighborhood, like higher density. And you can show that, like, this visual with the PUD is good, but it could be a little bit even more visually like representative of what's on the ground and what could be these different versions and trade-offs kind of.
Right.
So I think we could get better at designing the questions and using some visual
That'd be great.
presentation.
Yeah, because to me too, I'm looking at it as educational, right? Like we want to educate our
Yeah.
citizens on what is a PUD, what is an HDHO, right?
Right.
So people understand it.
Yeah.
Just this, I was
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay,
Well,
yeah.
People really like that, you know, that triggers.
I love what you're saying, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So Makeda has suggested scrapping them, though I think we all can make arguments for keeping them or not. Elisa made the point that maybe these could be reframed as a question under density. Again, well, actually, before I offer more opinions from my head, anyone else have any thoughts about how we move forward, or a strong disagreement with scrapping them now and reassessing and coming back to them at a later time more intentionally?
I will just reiterate one specific thing that I liked that Maketa said, where particularly question 1 is a bit of a black sheep among the questions in this survey. And being new here and not familiar with the background and political theater that went on making these questions necessary in the first place, this particularly question 1, but as well as the others, seem like they would be better served as discussion items in a public scoping type scenario during the general plan, when we or staff can communicate to the public and provide explanation. It just seems a little odd to have, relatively quick, 5 choice, 1 sentence questions, and then just, smack them with 301 level.
Yeah. Can everyone please go to Planizen and sign up with John Gunther's account, take the course, and then come back and answer this question?
Yeah, right.
Precisely. So, I mean, it happens a lot. You need to inform the public of the more complex components of work that you do. That is best done during public scoping periods, where you can provide explanation and offer an extended period of time for contemplation and response. I think these absolutely need to be addressed, especially hearing about the background information that went into them. But a quick survey might not be the right venue. So I support ditching them for the time being.
So let me put a straw poll on the table and then we'll move forward. So the question of this poll is, are we comfortable scrapping the 4 policy questions from this survey and tabling for a future agenda a conversation about how to reincorporate them into future planning, such as public outreach under the general plan, public education on the citizen portal, or other options? So All in favor of that approach, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's what we'll move forward with. I don't want to lose sight of these. I do think it's something we should come back to, but I want us to be thoughtful about how we come back to it. And I think as we continue public outreach around the general plan, John, Elisa, Jenna, inform us of where you think we can and should lean into public education, especially now that we have that great citizen portal. I think we have a lot of opportunity for that. Okay, so that covers the survey. What I'm going to do is just make sure there's nothing we're missing, any last minute adjustments, edits, and so on. Otherwise, we will straw poll to direct staff to get this. I don't think we need an official motion since it's not a, it's an internal thing, but heck, if somebody wants to make a motion just to be clean, we can go about it that way. Let's do it.
I'll make a motion to
Great.
table these 4 until the future
Okay, and adopt the survey as well as part of that.
and adopt the survey. Yes.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh.
second by Makeda, quick on the draw.
Aha.
So, motion by Tony, a second by Makeda to adopt the survey as discussed, amended this evening, including tabling the conversation of the 4 policy questions. All in favor? Yes, great. That was 6-0. Yay, it only took us however long it took us.
10 months.
10
Yeah,
months.
that's what I was gonna say, 10 months.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you, OB, so much for driving this forward. I really just want to call out, this is an immense amount of work behind the scenes. And Trisha, I know that you as well have been very involved in seeking incorporating citizen feedback throughout the process. So thank you all. Okay, before we move on to our next item, it is 5:23. We do have somebody who'd like to make a citizen's comment. Michael, if you want to come off of mute and introduce yourself, you have 3 minutes, and then we'll move on to our next agenda item.
Yeah, thank you for your time, Madam Chair. I thank you all for your service, and I come as someone who went ahead and purchased a piece of land, and when I purchased it, the planning and zoning map had it listed as highway commercial, and when I purchased it, highway commercial was entitled to a hotel and very high density, 18 units per acre. Unfortunately, we found out that was on the map in error, and that had never been voted on by the county, and that our zoning was range and grazing, and it was just simply a mapping error. And then anyway, we're adjacent to other highway commercial, and we went ahead and we applied for it. And one of the things we were told is that, look, we would be perhaps willing to give you this zoning, but 18 units per acre in a hotel, anyway, that's a lot of density, and there's no indication that there's any water there. And so we went ahead and we drilled a well. And anyway, there's a lot of ways that we could have drilled a well. In the past 20 years, the Park Service has gone ahead and protested every well that has been put in place. Anyway, we didn't like this. We didn't like the way that other developers had just gone ahead and brushed by the Park Service and didn't meet their requirements or work with them about their concerns about protecting the springs. And we went ahead and we spent a considerable amount of money drilling the well, and then and then we probably spent $50,000 extra to meet the additional requirements by the Park Service. And these are requirements that the Department of Drinking Water and Water Rights didn't require. And for the first time in 20 years, the Park Service not only didn't protest our water right, they went ahead and they wrote us a letter of support. Anyway, we feel like we were really doing things right. And then anyway, we got approved for this. And that's not common. In fact, no other well from the Navajo has gotten this. In fact, relatively recently, the new campground, they drilled a well and they did it, I believe, pretty appropriately, but they didn't get the flow rates they wanted, and their water quality was pure. It won't pass the Department of Drinking Water's requirement without further refinement. Anyway, we had a small lot residential request that we put through, and anyway, that was rejected. I'm trying to think that this is perhaps the lowest impact that we had.
Michael, you're at 3.5 minutes. Would you mind? We'd love to.
Very good.
Hear your
No,
comments.
in short, any person on the current planning staff could go ahead and re-enter that to the agenda. Or anyway, I'm happy to go ahead and go forward with overnight accommodations plans. I feel people want the thing. I'm hurt because I feel like I've played by the rules and things haven't worked out, and it's frustrating. Anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Michael, just out of curiosity, could you just restate, just so we could make sure we're clear? You mentioned wanting to get on the agenda. Could you just restate specifically what it is that you were hoping to make sure we heard this evening?
Sure. My desire is to get, I brought small lot residential before and it didn't pass. We can go forward with other plans, but I would take that in front of the county, but I know that the county's not going to approve something that the commission didn't give a positive review. And I feel like there's so little housing, and this is the only space in the area that has water that's approved that could help that. If someone from the planning commission requested us to be on the agenda again and we got a positive review, then we would love to bring housing to this. And this could be tiny homes. This could be any residential that the county is looking for. I know that residential is being looked for. Anyway, that if somebody on the planning staff wanted to go ahead and put that on the agenda, I would really appreciate it. And I think it would be something that could be heard again, that would benefit the county, before I moved on to something else that may not be. I mean, we're into this over $250,000 on the well, and then much more on the land.
Well, thank you for clarifying your
thank you.
statements. I wanted to make sure. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who's here to make a public comment? Okay, so this moves us on to our last item under the P&Z updates, looking at the draft general plan and timetable. And Elisa, did you say you wanted to table that, or how do you want to?
Oh, no, John was gonna talk about the general plan update. I could go through my shorter updates first if we wanted to, but I think John looks like he's ready to go. So let's just do that.
Okay.
Trying to unmute here, trying to unmute. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so you should have received this. All the planning commission members should have received this, as well as all the people on a steering committee. I sent it out to our client engagement group, which is about 90 people. And then I sent it to a number of different agencies around as well. And I have not heard one comment back at all.
Oh, boy.
And it's been 48 hours. So I don't know what's going on in the cyber world. Anyway, so I've got quite a checklist here of things that I still need to go through and add, and it's not comprehensive. Obviously, there's other things that can be added. I did have a list of things that were not included, and they are the table of contents is not there because it needs to be updated. There's a whole level of maps that are out there, and we can go hog wild on maps. We have a lot of them, and we have to be careful and strategic about how we put these in there and how we manage them. Appendices and guidelines need to be there as well. There's only a couple that are attached. An implementation action table is not there, and a list of studies and references. I've kind of fine-tuned that already, but even then, that's not completely comprehensive, but it's pretty close. There are a lot of gaps in the plan. And if you've skimmed it or looked at it, you'll see some of that. And there's some grammatical stuff that needs to be changed too, and I know that. So the goal is normally from a planning perspective, and it's like the planning commission to weigh in on this, is to come to a point where we have a penultimate or next to final draft. Penultimate being a British word that's used commonly in Canada. I'm not sure if it's used here at all, but that is to come forward with a plan that can then be referred to a public review process. We draw a line in the sand with the penultimate draft and then move ahead with public engagement changes on a very strict timetable. That's normally the way I'm used to doing it. And then the next step would be the full public review, which would be the next phase, which is right at the top of this handout, saying the public engagement part of it would actually go on for the next year and a half. And that would re-inform the public engagement section and the decision-making section and strategic planning section, although we will have drafts of those. The other thing that's going on at the same time, as you are well aware of, is a land use study, which the consultant's working on, and the transportation master plan, and an economic development master plan will be starting in the spring, as well as we're hoping for a housing forum and an economic forum. There is an economic forum planned already. And then the other one that's coming is an impact fee analysis. So we've got 4 plans running at the same time, which is a bit much, with the general plan as well, kind of seeing that. So I just wanted to kind of paint that picture for you, is to let you know that we have a lot of public engagement. We're trying to piggyback as much as we can, but there will be some cross currents, I guess, running that may not be as appetizing to the public as we'd want it to be. So the timetable is to present the draft to the steering committee and working groups that we've done, and to plan for a workshop. I know this changes the agenda a bit, and that's why we thought we'd bring the Spanish Valley survey forward, as well as a community-based survey that would follow after that too. And we would run that at the same time. And the commission's touched on that a couple of times at the general plan. So this is being put before you, not that we need a motion for it. I think we'd rather come back to you with the steering committee update sometime in December at the planning commission meeting, after we've vetted this through them, and then after we've got some comments back. I know it's a lot, it's a big document to chew over. It's over 147, 145 pages. And there's a list of things that I've kind of flagged that I thought needed attention. And as I mentioned, it still needs addition. So any comments that you've got on anything I might have missed, I tried to be as thorough as I could, but it's easy to miss things.
So John, just to make sure we're all on the same page, I just want to play back what I heard. So 1, you were asking for comments now or as soon as possible as people read through it. 2, following review by the steering committee at, let's just say, our first meeting in December, that is when we'd like to do a deeper review as a planning commission and give you a motion to go forward with it with our sort of blessing or whatever. And then public comment will follow. Did I get that timeline correct from you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of there,
Yeah.
November, December, meet individually to discuss sections, strategic planning draft. One approach we were thinking of with the planning commission would be to divide you up and have you pick various sections to focus on. It tends to, I don't know if that works for you. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And then the steering committee obviously would need to guide some of that. So the individual comments are welcome anytime.
Okay.
Corporate comments as far as the planning commission, we were hoping that we could schedule that for December. So we could focus, and maybe the focus might help if we actually divided the sections up. So that would be one of the other questions.
Well, I do have some questions I will come back to that are not comprehensive of my comments that I wanted some conversation, but Tony, it looks like you have your hand raised. So why don't you go ahead?
Yes, thank you, John. I was looking through this a little bit. I don't know why the email that I got only included bullets A, B, and 1, but I'm noticing you have also plans review, and under that section, there's a resource plan called RM State. I'm wondering, is that the Department of Natural Resources Recreation Management Plan that you're talking about?
Okay, just to go back, Tony, so what I sent you was the cover. When I sent the email, the cover was just the first two parts, but I attached the whole document.
Okay, super.
Okay,
I might have missed the attachment. I apologize for that.
No, it's okay.
But
So
yeah, they're under D22. You have RM State. I was wondering what that was.
the resource management requirement for the state, there's state law around that, and I need to
Okay.
research that more. Sorry, that I should have spelled that out a bit better. That's
That's
actually,
I don't know
track-
anything about, so I'm good. I was only curious. That's all.
yeah, and that was a track changes edition I just did, so it's not in the attached document. Yeah.
Understood. That's fine. Thank you, John.
So does anyone else have any?
I would be a proponent for splitting out some sections. I mean, I looked over this, and that's kind of what I naturally did, the things that I fall kind of more under my domain. But yeah, we'd be well into 2022 by the time I got done with it.
Before we start splitting it out, there are a couple of things that I just wanted to call out just for some high level conversation to make sure that there was nothing that John and staff could use in the short term. And then we'll talk about splitting it out. If anyone wants to go through and read the whole thing, you're more than welcome, but we will make sure that we get coverage. So page 40, we talk about scenic corridors, and there's a suggestion to convert 191 amongst other roads in the county into a scenic corridor. When I hear scenic corridor, I think scenic byway. I assume that's not what we're talking about. We're talking more about kind of what we did with 191 and 313. Would you mind just kind of giving us a high level overview of the thinking behind that and what it would encompass? Because I have some questions about cost and so on associated with that, depending on the definition. John?
Can you see my screen, Emily?
I do, but it doesn't, I don't see page, it looks like you're still at the intro. This was, it was page 40 of the Word doc when you sent it.
Yes.
You seen that?
Yes, there we go. So it was right there, right at the top. We'll identify highways 191, 313, ... as scenic corridors.
Right. Good. You're reading that. That's good to see, Emily. So
I had a long flight.
That's one of those controversial areas. Scenic corridors are always a good thing to put in a resort area. And it was referenced in the last plan, if you remember. This is a bit of mix and match. I picked the highways or the roads, the state roads that I thought were the most important in the area. And that's why I put it there. So I'm not sure exactly what your question is, but and the scenic corridor obviously has a number of design parameters around them, including how the buildings are oriented, how the built environment is, what the natural landscape looks like, what intensity and development there is, something that matches nature as best you can. And also in some cases, maybe has design standards that are more theme oriented. Although you don't want to, like people that talked about Disney-esque, you don't want a Disney-esque theme, of course, but something that gives more of a flavor. Let
me give a suggestion. We live along Spanish Valley Drive, and I would really like my son to be able to ride his bicycle in our neighborhood. If it is a scenic corridor and that negates paved trails, the cost of maintaining unpaved trails is high, and we have an unpaved trail in the area and it's overrun with tumbleweeds. So in my mind, it's neighborhood value, use, and safety traded off against the potential scenic value of making Spanish Valley Drive a scenic corridor. I don't know what the definition is, but I do think that it's just something I didn't want to get lost in the text, because safety of our neighborhoods, especially given the increased traffic in our arterial roads, is something that I, on a personal level, would rather see us go towards safety.
So scenic corridors would not have industrial. They wouldn't have high-end commercial. They would
So it's
be
just a
mixed
use.
It's a use-related thing, but
Okay.
it's also a design. It's also looking at nature, so more landscaping, more trees, more medians, more slowing down traffic, very conducive to pedestrians and multimodal.
Okay.
Yeah, but you ask a good question. That the definition of scenic and that those design standards are part of that.
Okay. Another potential gotcha is down on page 44, where one of the priorities that we encourage is enhancing the historic character of neighborhoods. When we were considering the HDHO, one of the one of the concerns that we heard raised by many residents was changing the nature and character of their neighborhood. And again, there's a trade-off between maintaining the character as it always has been, which is good for people who are already bought in, but is exclusionary to people who haven't had the economic means to buy in, versus adjusting the character to accommodate the actual needs of the community, such as potentially increased density. So again, that was another one that I just want to make sure that that trade-off is being, especially with this body, given very critical thought and consideration about how we define the historic I didn't write down I just wrote down the page number, but
Yeah,
how
so
we
I
define
think I'm
historic
following
character.
you. This is, as you probably know, in planning, history and heritage always adds value.
Mhm.
And you always bonus for those. And so there's tax increment financing, there's density bonusing that can be put in to add value. Those things take time, a lot of time. But if you don't work on these earlier and start to kind of flesh out what's there historically, then you tend to lose sight of them over time.
Mhm.
So I think I understand what you're saying, is that you don't want that to take the place or trade off with the types of values and that people may not connect with historically. Is that kind of what
I
you're
think
getting at?
I think it's a slippery slope question, which is maintaining the historical, because to me, historic character is more architectural or specific historical use. But one of the things we have heard in the Spanish Valley area particularly is that this is historically an agrarian area. People chose to move here because of the larger lots and the open space. And I think that is something we should work to preserve. And also doing that at the detriment of density across the county at a blanket wide approach can also be harmful. And so again, I'm not imposing a solution or change of text. I'm just more pointing it out so that we are not missing that in our deeper dives.
Okay, you might want to, comment on any of the value statements or policy statements that are
Okay.
here.
And if this isn't useful, commissioners, let me know. I can send this by text too, but I gave this a quick pass and there were a couple of things I just wanted to raise because I thought it was very relevant to this body. Here's a small one. On page 50, there's an extra U in neighborhood. It's British.
Okay, there
On
will
that one.
be,
Okay, one other one that I wanted to raise, only because this has come up when we were looking at the small area planning on 313, and I just lost my notes. I actually don't know what page this, when you talk about the ridgeline overlay, I have 6.9.6. There is a specific item in there that says any item any road in a scenic corridor, which we've already said would be all roads in the county generally, all these larger arterial roads, that we would need to protect the ridgeline overlay, meaning that you had to be able to see the ridgeline from the road. But elsewhere, we say along those roads, we want to move the buildings as close to the road as possible and put the parking in the back and create sort of, those seem in conflict with each other, given the fact that the way that the aspect is from the road, the closer to the road the building is, the higher likelihood that it blocks the ridgeline, the further set back,
Yeah.
the more likely. So I don't know how we marry those.
there is a balance there for sure. The downtown core would be something like that. You would have to have a smaller building kind of profile as you're driving down. But one of the things you notice is that buildings closer to the road slow down traffic. And so there's a balance there for sure. And you want to still maintain those view corridors. And so a good view corridor study is probably part of that.
Okay. Two more small things I'll call out that don't need discussion. One is anytime we talk about noise, noise is referenced in terms of wilderness uses that produce excessive noise, commercial uses, in-home services, so potentially permitting people who work from home but provide services as far as traffic. When we looked at the noise ordinance at the county level, we introduced into code but didn't do much with it, this idea of community zones, since we don't have the ability to govern specific residential zones as far as traffic patterns. I think noise is something I'd really like to see us lean into here. When we say noise, we're not just talking about noise on our trails. We mean noise in our neighborhoods. We mean noise through, transit flow, access to different paths. And I didn't see that addressed. I ran a Control F and I
You did?
didn't see it addressed anywhere in here. So maybe it was and I just missed it, but I just want to make sure if I didn't see it on first pass, it might not be explicit enough. So that was the one I saw. So if you work from home and you run, a massage business or something, and you have people coming into your neighborhood, I can understand that, but that's very different than, and also to me, that use is different from people who rent out their homes as nightly rentals and allow for more noisy vehicles to infiltrate our
Yeah.
neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Yeah.
And then the last one actually relates to the conversation that we had earlier in the meeting as far as the Mill Creek Collective. I had made this comment and I don't know what to do with it. I'm increasingly seeing this pattern where the increased tourism leads to increased regulation in order to protect our areas from excessive use. But in my mind, it means that full-time residents of Grand County are penalized by the behavior of tourists. So for example, when my children were young, loved to take them up to the teacups at Mill Creek because it was cool and it was shady and I could get them out of the house in the summer. If we have to hike into that along with all of the tourists who would bring up their caravans and destroy our ecological zones, it makes it harder for my children to enjoy the place we call home. And I see that elsewhere. And it's not just a county lands issue, it's also a public lands issue, such as different trailheads like the Hidden Valley Trailhead. But I just see this increasing pattern where locals are penalized. And I would really like to see us take a more affirmative stance through our general planning to carve out ways to allow for locals to enjoy their home while still governing the effects of overuse and the crowd impacts of tourism. And some ways about that could be residential permitting. It could be some sort of like because you pay taxes here, you get a free sticker on your car, and people with that sticker on the car. That's a very tactical example to the strategic planning. But I'd really like to see us take a more affirmative stance to improving the quality of life for locals and not just blanketing against the harm that we currently experience as a community. So that one I don't have text item for, but I do want to raise that.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Emily.
Sorry, y'all, that you got all my comments, but
I really love that last one, Emily. That was really, really valuable. And I've heard that from countless people.
Okay, that's pretty well, it's out there, and yeah, any comments like that, we always take them, once they're said in a commission meeting, we take notes, so that's good.
Okay. Well, now I can keep my mouth shut at the next one. I didn't want to lose these now that it was fresh in my mind. Does anyone else have any other comments, any questions about this? Otherwise, what I am going to ask is that we carve out a pretty large block of time at our next meeting, maybe take some other things off the agenda so we can focus very deeply on this. And then let's quickly talk about splitting this up and making sure that we have coverage of it if anyone's concerned about having time to read through the full thing. John, you're the expert of this. How would you recommend we carve this up?
Well, voluntary is always the best. So I would start with Steve because he's made some choices already.
Let me get back to my table of contents here. It's a lot of scrolling. Oh gosh. So there's kind of the 14 different areas: context and outcomes, horizons, decision-making, sustainability. I won't go through the full list.
There's actually 10 major areas. So you may not pop out to you directly. So yeah, we had you down for some, we actually divided you all up and had some ideas, but we didn't want to assign them.
No, go for it. Tell us where you landed.
Oh, I see what you did there. You kind of tricked us, and now it feels like we're taking your suggestion by choice. So we're more bought in. That was
This is how we volunteer for things. I actually went to the 14 sections, all the one that has 14 also. That's what I thought he was going to ask, but here we're going to go.
Yeah, it's like a dodgeball team. See where you put us. We'll listen.
Okay, well, we had Steve, you have we down for the first public engagement decision-making section. So, and maybe more on the administration side. Emily, we had you more on land use and probably transportation, because how many have we got? We got 7 members, so I don't know, you might have to share in some of that too. The social one too. And public safety, I think we're putting Tony in there. And probably other infrastructure. I don't know, Tony, if you would like that. Public safety, so it would be sewer, water, stormwater, those elements.
John, I'm happy to help as ever I am needed. My personal expertise is in recreation, natural areas, and environment. That's the one thing I know the most about.
So Parks and
I am happy,
Recreation,
however, to
Parks and
help out.
Recreation, okay, Parks and Recreation would actually be a good one. I think we might have had you there too.
Yeah, I can take as much as you need me to. I'm happy to help.
Okay, so Parks and Recreation and Culture, which we put all together. So some people don't put culture in there, but it's usually one of those ones that you kind of gravitate towards. OB, I think we had you, I mean, there's a big sustainability section that pulls a bunch of things together. I know Emily would be, well, all of you would be good at this, but that'd be a good one too. Which kind of pulls everything together and starts talking about smart growth. That's kind of in that section, one of the sections that talks about the strategic plan, smart growth, the types of orientation, design standards, development standards.
John, you're saying would I find this under sustainability?
Yeah, it's really, it's under a number of names: smart growth and sustainability and climate change, adaptation, mitigation.
So everyone, if you're looking at the print, this is on page 4 of the full version, by the way, this list he's reading off of. That helps.
Yeah.
May well.
So finance is a big section too, which usually more is the fiscal impact analysis. It's more the high level, although the impact, there's a number of deliverables that come out of that, including the impact fees, those kinds of things. I'm not sure if I could pick anybody that was a financially oriented person.
Rick, does that sound like something you would be interested in?
Maybe Rick, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thrilled.
Okay. What am I missing?
Keta
Makeda.
and Josie.
Health, economy, and social environment. Did you call that one out yet, John?
No, economy needs to be done too. Yeah. So social I gave to you, Emily, but I don't know if you're keen on that. or
Oh,
not.
was that under health? Yeah, okay, because of the.
Yeah.
Why don't we do this? Actually, just because I think it might be easier if we're looking at it. John, would you and Elisa mind just sending an email out with your recommendations? And then if anyone feels very strongly, we can pair up and jockey and figure it out. And just a reminder, if you're putting your name next to it, the assumption is you will read it, you will come with comments, you will be the expert on behalf of the body. So, be mindful about what you're committing to. But I think that might be easiest. Does everyone
Sure.
feel comfortable with that?
I think
And then
that's
Josie
great.
can be involved in that as well. Okay.
Unless anybody's got a real strong desire. I know
Rick is
Steve, you
very
had-
excited about finance. That one's clear. So
So Rick, and this is high level. This isn't bean counting, Rick. You know that, right? You know the high level financing. And Steve, you were kind of more on the public engagement side of things. I know, I'm not sure if that's where you wanted to gravitate still.
Was you talking to?
Yeah, that's fine. the only issue comes up when we have a public engagement, like meeting or get together, and I already have something planned for that week when I'm out of town or the country.
well, this is going through the document and providing recommendation on the approach we take. So I think, okay. So let's
Okay,
do
sounds
that. And gosh, just incredible work. Thank you so much. This is really exciting to see it move forward.
Okay, I think that's all. Emily, is that, or Elisa, sorry. Elisa, is that all we had?
I just had a few short updates on a few things. If you guys want to stay on, or we could talk about them at the next meeting. They're not urgent. It's just kind of status updates.
Anyone feel strongly? I'm fine to punt until our next meeting.
There will
Right.
always be more to offer you as more time goes on. So I'll have more information even by the next meeting. So.
Well, I do think it would be interesting to hear the land use code and OAO in the context of having reviewed the general plan. And so that'll be useful. We talked through the housing plan update. And then grants and economic development. John, why don't we see if August wants to join us at our next meeting and give us a quick 10-minute overview?
That would be great. I just had attended their meeting in place of John last week. And I just found it really exciting and interesting, all the things they're talking about and the grant that they're applying for. And so, yeah, there's a lot that I think we could benefit from having August to fill us all in.
Let's plan on asking him to join and see if we can make that happen. Wonderful. All right. Well, if there's no other items, I said I wanted to get us out of here at 6. We're doing it, y'all. Okay. So I'll take a motion if anyone is chomping at the bit.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
All right.
Second.
Second. All right. Any opposed?